Hey, welcome to the Lean to the Left podcast, where we pull no punches in calling out Donald Trump, who seems determined to fashion some form of dictatorship and is now stoking speculation about seeking a third term. He told NBC News recently that he's not joking and that there are methods for doing so. Now, 5 years ago, just before the 2020 election, best-selling New York Times author Paul Greenberg wrote a political satire in which he brought George Washington back from the grave to run against the tyrant, who obviously was Donald Trump. He doesn't name him in the book, but he calls him the tyrant. Greenberg is the author of 7 books, including the New York Times bestseller Four Fish. A regular contributor to the Times and a frequent guest on national TV and radio, Mr. Greenberg lectures widely and currently teaches in New York University's Animal Studies graduate program. He lives at Ground Zero in Manhattan, where he produces, to his knowledge, the only wine grown and bottled south of 14th Street. In a third term, Greenberg throws plenty of challenges in Washington's path: slavery, sexual indiscretion, and another visitor from the past. Can he overcome them and prevent the tyrant from doing even further damage to our country? I'm delighted to have Paul Greenberg with us today. Hey, Paul, welcome to the Lean to the Left podcast.
Thanks, Bob. So great to be on the show.
Hey, you're known as a best-selling environmental writer, Paul, with 7 novels under your belt. Why did you publish this political satire right now? Why did you do that?
Yeah, so I write mostly about environmental justice, the ocean, saving our planet for our children, and so forth. And I would have been happy to just march along and write stuff about the natural world. But at a certain point, I started to very much understand that you cannot have an environmental movement and you can't have ecological consciousness without a democratic form of government. And 5 years ago, when I saw that form of government threatened by he who shall remain nameless, the tyrant, I sat down, and this book actually just came to me in whole cloth. I've never really had that experience before. Authors talk about taking dictation from some sort of spiritual force from above. But for me, I'd never had that. I always found book writing to be a slog. But in this case, this book really came to me fully formed. And I literally took dictation from some sort of source above me and produced this novella. I put it in the drawer after Biden won in 2020, thinking don't have to deal with that anymore.
Right.
But right around the beginning of 2024, I could see we were in this business again. And fortunately for me, I was able to take the book out of the drawer and do something with it. But unfortunately for the country, we are indeed stuck with a tyrant for the moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, in your book, the Supreme Court's found a loophole that allows the tyrant to seek a third term. How prescient was that? Today, Trump says there are methods that he could pursue to run again. What do you think? Did he read your book?
I don't think he's read it yet. Otherwise, I'd probably be getting all kinds of trolling on my social media accounts. But I worked in the former Soviet Union for many years, and I've worked in many countries in which dictators have arisen. And so I understand their pathways, and leaving open the idea that there are loopholes, that there are possibilities, is the tyrant's methodology. You just open it up for questions in the first place.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, as we've seen in this first 100 days, and I think we're talking on the anniversary of 100 days of Trump 2.0, that most of what's going on is extra constitutional, that is beyond what the Constitution allows. And so in a way, whether or not he does seek a third term, the whole concept of a third term is a metaphor for the whole question of should a president behave within the constraints of the Constitution, or should, as people are floating the idea, should the president be like a CEO? I don't know if you've seen that floated around.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
CEO and be able to do whatever he wants, depending on his own will.
I've also seen pictures I saw a picture on social media yesterday with, I think, 4 or 5 people, and they all had T-shirts on that said, Trump is God.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Let's keep in mind that all tyrants have emerged from, not all, but many have emerged from representational systems. The Roman Republic had their Caesar. Stalin came out of a still undecided Communist Party. Hitler arose out of a democratic republic. All of these, the problem with tyrants and with dictators is that they don't recognize rules.
Yeah.
And if you do not have an adequate force opposing that just blunt instrument, then rule-based societies crumble ultimately. So we, as I hope still a rule-based society, have to find our way.
Now, where did the idea of bringing George Washington back from the dead to save democracy come from? And
Well,
why did you pick him and not Lincoln or Jefferson or somebody
yeah,
else?
it's a good question. I think what I found in the 2020 campaign and in the previous Trump administration was that there were such egregious violations in speech and in deed of the administration of what we consider to be core American values that people were just giving a pass on. And it suddenly occurred to me, what if one of the founding fathers, who is literally the author of those founding values, were to go head to head with this tyrant? Would the tyrant, would Trump and all of his followers believe him before they would believe the own founder of their own country? And I would say maybe at this point. And why I chose Washington, a few different reasons. I think that Washington always makes people perk up a little bit, right? We don't actually know, the average American doesn't actually know that much about Washington's character.
Right.
We just know him as the first, as the founder. And the
Right.
other really important reason is keep in mind that up until FDR, there was no constitutional limit on the number of terms that you could run for. And when Washington completed his second term, he was very much encouraged to run for a third and on into the future. He willingly stepped down, and that very kind of noble gesture in a way is the embodiment of what our republic stands for. We don't stand for hereditary power. We don't stand for unlimited, unended power. We stand for the will of the people choosing our leaders. So to me, it was an interesting idea that Washington's brought back. He's asked by the political functionaries who bring him back to run for a third term against his will. And then meanwhile, you have this tyrant, this Trump-like tyrant, who desperately wants a third term and
Right.
fourth term and a fifth term.
It to me, it Trump talking about a third term is just beyond the pale. First of all, he'd be 150 years old or whatever, for crying out loud.
Yeah. I don't you think that, I mean, you even saw it with Joe Biden. I think it was very clear to those around him that, 2 years into the term, that he probably should have stepped down
Yeah.
and allowed a younger person to come in.
Yeah.
But I think that power is blinding,
Yeah.
and it leads you to believe that you have capacities beyond your capacities. And I have no doubt that Trump is in a self-delusion that he could potentially live forever. There's a line from a third term from my book where the tyrant is whimsying about why it is right that he should be running for a third term. He says, "Isn't my own health the health of the republic? Now that I have the National Institutes of Health, all of modern American science devoted to my longevity, isn't my longevity going to be a good thing ultimately because everyone then can follow in my path?" I have no doubt that sort of thinking is going on right now inside that person's head.
Oh my God. I believe you. I believe you. I believe you're absolutely correct. Um,
Yep.
yep. Now, in your book, you've got curveballs from the left and right that come at Washington from about any angle.
Yep.
What are some of them, and how are they similar to what Trump and MAGA did to Biden and Kamala Harris, and how were they overcome?
Yeah, the main one is that at the very beginning of the book, when Robert Connolly, who is the sort of, I guess, David Plouffe or David Axelrod equivalent, who's
Yeah.
brought back Washington,
Yeah.
he and number two are saying before they bring Washington back, they shouldn't we discuss the whole slavery issue because Washington very much was a slave owner, and they're like, no, we let it's not. Then they say it's never going to come up. The other side, the Republican side, never going to bring up the whole issue of slavery. That's the last thing they want to talk about.
Right.
But of course, in one of the presidential debates that the tyrant has with Washington, where they've completely rigged the audience and know the questions in advance because I'm forecasting a time when Fox News is the only network that is allowed to participate in political debate, that there is an African American participant in this sort of town hall meeting, and he raises the question of slavery. And this, of course, throws Washington totally into paroxysms of self-doubt. And the tyrant, knowing that this question is going to be asked, drills down on him and really tries to force his hand to admit how wrong he was. So
Hmm.
I won't give away the book because it's a turning point in the book, but let's just say that at that point, Washington considers actually resigning and not going forward with the election. But
Okay. Washington had other issues besides slavery to deal with, right? For
yeah,
example, he got in trouble over some kind of sex scandal, right?
he does in the book. And
That's
again,
what I mean in the book. Yeah.
I do play with the idea that it's Washington, when he left office and when he left this life, left no children. He and
Uh-huh.
Martha never had natural children together. He had only stepchildren. And it's posited that due to a bout of either malaria or typhoid, that rendered him sterile. And that he was not, as the tyrant says, he shoots blanks. So again, without giving too much away in the
I
book,
can hear Trump saying that.
yeah, absolutely. Washington shoots blanks.
Yeah.
As I wanted to play with that idea that what happens when a man gets accused of shooting blanks. That's the ultimate challenge to the manlyhood.
Mhm.
And as readers will find, Washington steps up in that regard and finds, let's just say, a way to shoot something else. But again, readers should just the good thing about the book is that it's only 100 pages. As you and I, Bob, were chatting before the show,
Yeah.
the attention span of the American public is, I think 100 pages is a stretch for most Americans these days. But I think if I sprinkle the crumbs of a possible sexual scandal in the latter third of the book, perhaps I can get people past page, say, 65.
You got me all the way through it. I loved it. I thought it was great. And I loved the idea of you weaving that sex stuff into it.
Yeah, I have a friend who's read every one of my fish books.
Okay.
And don't get me wrong, the fish books have sold well.
Uh-huh.
My environmental books, as I say, I would have been happy to just keep going with that. But
Hmm.
my friend, he's French, and he always says, "Where's the sex? Where's the sex?" And I finally decided to listen, and I gave it to him to read, and he read. He goes, "Ah, there is the sex."
That's funny. I interview a lot of authors, and it sounds to me like you have a great deal of fun doing what you're doing.
I like it. The thing is, talking's much easier than writing.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
once it's interesting talking about a book enough makes you realize what to focus on. I remember a few years back, so I'm friendly with the author Michael Pollan. I don't know if you've read his books like Omnivore's Dilemma, but I remember a few years ago, I had a book out called American Catch, and everyone was obsessed with the fact that a lot of the salmon that we eat to China, frozen, defrosted, filleted, and then refrozen and sent back to us double frozen. And I was on Terry Gross, and she was, "Are you telling me that your fish is double frozen? My mother told me never to do." And it was really weird. Everyone latched onto that one thing. So
Right.
going back to the third term, as I'm traveling around with this, I think the idea that Washington has sex is something that people are latching onto. So, you just talk enough about it, and the cream or the filth rises to the top, depending on your perspective.
Oh, all righty then. What do you think we can do to stop Trump from seeking and maybe even getting a third term?
I think we have to understand that the next two election cycles could be our last in terms of like legitimacy. So I think we really need to focus on elections integrity. I talk to a lot of heads of foundations and people within the sort of the democracy space.
Mhm.
And people are asking, should we do this? Should we do that? I just think we need a laser-like focus on elections integrity. The way that the Constitution is set up, states determine the outcome of elections. And there's already executive orders trying to tamper with those things. So rather than putting out this fire in Greenland or that fire in Canada or this fire over here with the tariffs, I think it's probably prudent at this point to really focus all attention. We need to go one step ahead of the constant noise and really look at elections and make sure that all of this crazy behavior is ultimately decided upon in the ballot box. If we can't decide it in the ballot box, then there's no getting rid of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct there. People have got to stop being passive and understand that we're under a serious threat here. This guy is attacking our democracy like I've never imagined that could happen in this country.
Yeah. And going back to, I think we were maybe chatting about this before the show, but I think there are all these kind of apologies being put forth about what this regime is. And some
Yeah.
people have entered the idea that, what America really needs right now is a CEO and not a representational democracy. But let's look at it real carefully. A CEO is a dictator, right?
Yeah.
A CEO gets to do whatever he wants, and it's usually he, and take the company in whatever direction he wants to. Now, with one exception, corporations have boards of directors that can hire and fire the CEO.
Yeah.
They have stockholders that can dump the stock or the bonds of the company.
Exactly.
If we allow this CEO to continue on as we're doing, there's not going to be a board of directors, and voters themselves are going to be disenfranchised. So all this kind of like myth making, this sort of obfuscation, we really just need to block it out of our heads and remind ourselves that we do have a representational democracy and it's ours to lose.
You told me that you're getting a lot of interest from young people, college kids, and that you've been invited to colleges to speak. So there's been a good reaction from Generation Z.
There has been. And again, one of the reasons it's short, like I also teach at university, and I know that my students have hard time getting through dense, long pieces of literature. So
Sure.
it's on pages. They respond to that. I think they also respond. It was funny when I first wrote this book 5 years ago, it landed right around the time of Black Lives Matters.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of re-excavating of the legacy of the founding fathers during that time. I don't know if you remember that, but
Right.
there was a lot of calling out of the fact that Washington was a slaveholder. And I remember my literary agent at the time said, I don't think anyone really wants to talk about Washington right now. No. But what I'm finding is the fact that Washington does have a kind of come to Jesus moment with slavery. I find that the young people really tune in on that. And they want their worldview to be put back together. I think they spent a lot of time tearing it apart. But I think now that they're finding themselves on the receiving end of a potential dictatorship, they would like to reconcile the past with the hope that they have for a more equitable future. So I think this book gives that opportunity. What I like to say is 4 years ago, I don't know, did you read Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny?
No, I did not.
So it's a short book, similar length,
Okay.
but he's a scholar at Yale, previously at Yale, but it's a short book of lessons how you behave when a tyrant assumes power. And meanwhile, Timothy Snyder has actually just left Yale for Canada. So in a way, I would like to see this little book be the on tyranny for this Gen Z generation
Okay.
and a little bit of a guidepost for those guys going forward.
He went to Canada because of what's going on with Trump?
Supposedly, there were three scholars left Yale about a month ago, and they all decamped for, I believe, the University of Toronto. Now, listen, I have nothing against Canada, and certainly it's interesting. My son is actually at McGill at the moment in Montreal, and it's very strange because I go back and forth to Canada quite a bit, and it's
Mhm.
strange it's like almost entering a kind of simulacrum of America because all the same institutions and ways of behavior that we had prior to January 2025 are still functioning in Canada. And I actually think that there's a very real reason why Trump is being so threatening to Canada because he believes, just like Russia saw in the example of Ukraine, a liberal democracy on its border. Trump doesn't like the idea of a liberal democracy on our border. I think we're going to see a lot more tension along those lines, but I'm hoping our friends to the north can give us a little bit of moral support as we go forward in these next few years.
Yeah, let's hope so. Now, I saw that you have an unusual distribution strategy
Yeah,
for your book. Tell me about that.
yeah.
What have you been doing?
So I really believe the independent bookstore is going to be I don't know, the model for democratic gatherings going forward. Because when you think about it, libraries can get their funding cut, nonprofits can get their nonprofit status revoked. But
Right.
a bookstore is a business, right? Their
Mhm.
business is bringing people together around ideas. So what I've done with this book, the way it started is the book came out. I went to my local bookstore, Three Lives in Manhattan. I said, Toby, the owner, I said, you wouldn't want to take a few copies of this, see what happens. And he goes, sure. So I gave him 10 copies. A week later, he goes, the darndest thing happened. We sold out. Do you have 10 more? And I was like, yes, I do. And he just keeps ordering and ordering. And so word started getting around to other independent bookstores, and people have approached me. And so when an independent bookstore approaches me, I'm happy to work with them, maybe come in virtually. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to my old hometown of Greenwich, Connecticut, and doing a reading there in the heart of Trump country in Connecticut. The
Nice.
headquarters are all, but it's been very heartening. And then the other, I think, way I'm going to work with this book going forward, as you mentioned, is universities, because I am getting interest from political scientists, from historians. It's a nice nexus It's a nice little history lesson. It's a nice lesson in civics, and it's a nice way, I think, for young people to be invited into the discussion.
Oh, that's really good. I love that idea. But you also have it on Amazon and the
I do.
online places, right?
Yeah, you can't fight that beast. And
Yeah, that's right.
I
That's
mean,
right.
so many people, I have a fair amount of friends who are boycotting Amazon, and God bless if they'd like
Yeah.
to do that. But Amazon, I've been working with a company called My Word Publishing, and when we were bringing this book out, she was saying, the Polly Litovsky, who runs the company, she was saying you could go through these independent digital platforms, but they represent exactly 2% of digital sales. So if you want to be on Kindle, for example, I don't know, Bob, if you read on Kindle, but I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And it's just the distribution just isn't there.
Right.
My goal is deep penetration throughout the democracy that we embrace. And
There you
so
go.
there, go for it.
Hey, what the hell is Ground Zero Press?
That's me.
That's
No,
you.
it's not me. So I set up an LLC to publish this,
Okay.
and I actually live at Ground Zero, as you
I
can.
know.
Another incarnation I have. You said it. You pointed at it, but I sometimes refer to myself as the Ground Zero gardener because we have a terrace here down at Ground Zero, and we are, in addition to producing the only wine grown south of 14th Street, we also are salad self-sufficient from about May through November. If everything goes to hell, we'll at least have our daily greens.
So the guy is, you're growing grapes in New York City
I
and
am
making
indeed.
wine out of it?
I am indeed, yes. So I have Frontenac grapes from the Finger Lakes that I've been nurturing these last 10 years. And
Wow.
then I take the grapes. I have a friend who, it's funny, he in the summertime, he's a native Alaskan salmon fisherman.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, he works with Long Island grape growers. So he has all the facilities to help me put the grapes together. And he is churning out my wine is called Chateau Nul, which means Chateau Zero. In French, if you want to say somebody's a loser, you say c'est un nul, so it's a zero. So that gives you an idea of the quality of the wine. Oh yeah,
I'd love to check it out, man. That sounds really cool.
yeah. You can see I've written about it for the New York Times and the Guardian. Yeah. So as I say, if the book thing doesn't pan out, there's always the vineyard.
We had an invitation to go to some friend's house for dinner yesterday. And so I grabbed a bottle of wine out of the refrigerator. That I know that the woman, the wife of my friend that invited us, she loves Pinot Grigio. So I grabbed a bottle of Pinot Grigio out of my wine rack, stuck it in the fridge, and chilled it. And then when it was time to leave, I went to the fridge, I grabbed a bottle of wine, stuck it in the bag. And when we got there, I said, "Hey, I brought you a bottle of wine." And I take the bottle of wine out of the bag, and it's a half empty bottle of Pinot Noir.
Oh
And
dear.
yeah, which I had stuck in the fridge, grabbed the wrong one. So I was thoroughly embarrassed. But oh,
With the advantage of growing your own wine is
yeah,
that it's in such a funky bottle that you can't mistake it.
there you go. All right. So what's next for a third term? What are you gonna do next? And is there going to be a movie?
Yeah, so currently I'm working with an Emmy Award-winning writer, and we're developing it as a dramatic script. Um,
Whoa.
we're, we're, for the moment, there's a kind of tiered approach to getting to Hollywood. So I think the next step may be an audio drama that will hopefully release in the summer or the fall. I would love to see it as a movie. I'm friendly with John Hamm, and I'm friendly with, or my producing partner is friendly with Paul Giamatti. So I would love
Mhm.
to see a John Hamm, Paul Giamatti cast to roll this out.
That sounds
We
cool.
we did do a dramatic reading of it when the book launched, where we had another guy from the cast of Billions, a guy named Kelly O'Coin, who played the part of Dollar Bill in
Uh,
that show. But he, for me, Dollar Bill. Who else is on the Dollar Bill but Washington? So he played Washington. Yeah, and we're going to just do a straight audiobook. Actually, I'm laying down that track with an actor on Thursday. It will continue to change, expand, reach other
cool.
people. Hopefully, might be some foreign language editions with some people
Wow.
abroad. So
Wow.
we'll see.
Yeah. All right. So the money's going to come rolling in, dude.
It's trickling in at the moment. It's doing far better than I ever thought it would do,
Well,
and
that's good.
this is a passion project. There are books that have made me considerable amounts of money. This one hopefully will, but if it were to change a number of votes in the future, that would be good enough for me.
Yeah, that would be good. So what do you think Washington would do today if he could see what's going on in our political system?
You have to remember that the founding fathers were in their own way radical. They've created an entirely new form of government out of a monarchical system that they rejected. I think he would recognize where we were headed. I think that Washington was not a willing participant in the revolution, but by the time he joined, he was all in. And he used to say that we fought with halters about our necks. In other words, our heads were already in the noose. And so
Right.
we knew that we had to win. And I think Washington, one of the things that comes through in the novella is that Washington was indisputably, you can say what you will about his reputation as a slave owner and so forth, but he was incredibly brave.
Hmm.
And one incident during the French and Indian War, where he charged head of his troops into battle. And his troops to this day, or to the day that he died, didn't know how he survived because when he came back to the camp, his tunic was full of musket holes, but somehow he managed to survive. And so
Wow.
I think, and this speaks to a bigger question, is like being a leader requires great bravery and it requires great self-confidence. And I think if anything has taught us anything in the last few years is that we have a crisis in leadership on the left and amongst the young. And so I guess what I'm hoping that this book will do, we're not going to bring Washington back, obviously, but I think we can inspire people to step up and to be leaders. And when I've been touring on campuses, I've been saying, if you have the slightest instinct to be a leader, and you have an opportunity to lead, then take it. I don't care if it's leadership of your table tennis club. I don't care if it's head of your school newspaper or whatever, but leading breeds more leading. And we can't just passively sit back and scroll through our iPhones. We have to make decisions.
Okay, good point. Good point. All right. Listen, I really appreciate you coming on with me on the Lean to the Left podcast, Paul. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Just if people want to buy the book, feel free to just browse around to their local bookstore or to go onto Amazon if they'd like. And my website is paulgreenberg.org. You're welcome to check that out and just lead, participate, be active in your government. Don't go quietly into that dark night.
Very good. And I will say that in the description of this podcast that you guys will find online, I'll have a direct link, a direct Amazon link for this book that you can click on that if you want to. Just be easy for you. If you can't get to a local bookstore where Paul has stashed his books.
Good.
Paul, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Bob.
Hey guys, I'm Bob Gatty, founder and host of Lean to the Left. I'm excited to share our new book, Hijack Nation, Donald Trump's Attack on America's Greatness, co-authored with political analyst and professor C.J. Waldron. In Hijack Nation, we delve into the unfolding story of America's political landscape through a series of essays from leantotheleft.net. We explore how Donald Trump's presidency has transformed American politics, challenging our values and institutions. Hijack Nation isn't just a book, it's a call to action. It invites you to reflect on what it means to be American in a divided political landscape. Together we can reclaim our nation's greatness. So get your copy of Hijack Nation today. Visit leantotheleft.net and click on the Books tab to learn more and to order.